Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I think we are ready to begin. We have all the speakers online and everybody is sound checked. We have 82 participants who have logged on, and that is out of a total 310 people who have registered for this seminar. So for this webinar. So what we expect is that a number of people will join us midway, but we will begin nonetheless to respect the time. So welcome. We are so excited to have you, and we say thank you very much to our speakers and to all the participants who we'll call delegates who have registered for this webinar. First for the Office of the President, and we are really excited by the large turnout. Thank you for making the time. We have to manage our time very effectively. We have 120 minutes to have a robust discussion on a very broad number of topics. We want to cover as much ground as we want to cover the depth of the content as well. So the idea is to hold this virtual town hall meeting. It was sparked by you, the young people on social media. On the 4th of June, when His Excellency the President delivered his State of the Nation address, there was so much discourse online. A lot of young people were asking relevant questions and saying, well, if I was in Parliament, this is what I would have wanted to know. And we want to encourage that kind of civic participation. We want young people to be engaged in the discourse. We also have an obligation to share as much information as we can with you, and also to learn from you, from your perspectives, from your insights and experiences. And I think that is how we enrich each other and empower each other. Through the engagements of this nature, we hope that we will be able to have an inclusive dialogue this afternoon. To do so, there have to be house rules and some rules of engagement. So with your permission, I just want to outline how we are going to handle the format of our program today. We have a very short program. I'm going to share the screen so that I can project the program to you. Or rather, I'm going to drop it into into the chat room. I think that'll be more effective. But we're going to have a plenary of 40 minutes that I'm going to moderate. I will precede that plenary by providing an overview of the President's State of the Nation address. And thereafter, we're going to go into an interactive Q&A discussion, really unpacking those themes that we have touched on in the plenary, so that we can maintain a focused discussion. At the end of our dialogue, we're going to have a key take-home summary before we conclude. All this in 100 minutes, so let us go. I'm joined today by an esteemed panel of experts, officials, familiar faces, people who need no introduction really in Namibia's development sector. I'm very grateful to have the Honorable Deputy Minister of Information and Communication Technology, Emma Theophilus, here with us. Thank you, Mr. Nikembwa, the CEO of the Agribank. Thank you, Mr. Nkumbi, and welcome, the CEO of the Development Bank of Namibia. Ms. Helian Ndago Herman is a board member of the Namibia Procurement Board, Central Procurement Board, and Vuyo Jack is a member of the high-level panel on the economy. He is a venture capitalist and an economic transformation strategist. We're joined by Sam Mutoni, who is passionate about capacitating young people to lead and has his own program. We're joined by Patrick Sam, the chairperson of the National Art Council of Namibia, and definitely last but not least, Mr. Freddie Muya, who is the CEO of the Namibia Sports Commission. My colleague, who is very instrumental to this conversation, Dr. Michael Humavindu, our Deputy Executive Director for Industrialization and Trade, is on the way, and he will be joining us shortly. We can begin. I think what I should transition into as we move from the introductory remarks into setting the scene and contextualizing our conversation for today is to encourage an inclusive dialogue. I wanted to indicate that we have received a lot of feedback from those who have registered for this webinar. We welcome that feedback, and we are going to build on it for subsequent similar engagements so that we can continuously improve on the quality of the engagements that we're having. Experience is the only way that you can garner wisdom, they say. We're going to send out a survey midway during our poll. It's going to come up as a pop-up window. Please, once you receive that survey, answer the few questions. It's to help us to shape the quality of these engagements for future purposes. So when it pops up, don't delay, just do it. Okay, let's maintain mutual respect in dialogue and tolerance, and let's present honest information and data to one another so that we do not misinform or disinform. I think that really is the summary of how we want to engage this afternoon. Now, we can move to providing some contextual remarks on the State of the Nation address that was delivered by His Excellency the President on the 4th of June, 2020 in the House of Parliament. As you are aware, the President delivered his first State of the Nation address as President of the Republic of Namibia for his second term and final term as President. But this is the sixth State of the Nation address that President Geingob delivered as President of the Republic of Namibia. The State of the Nation address was unique because the President has delivered a grand narrative in this statement. There were essentially three statements that the President delivered. The first was a review of his first term of office for the first 5 years and reporting on the development progress achieved by government for the term. The second was to highlight and to outline Namibia's strategic response in dealing with the COVID pandemic. And the President also highlighted the future vision casting and economic recovery plan for his second term of office and for government in general. The President delivers a State of the Nation address as a constitutional mandate. He is required under Article 52, subsection 2, every year to report to Parliament on the progress that government has made in the preceding year and to how the government plans to address the future policies for development. The President is also then obliged to respond to questions on the floor, as we have seen during the parliamentary debate. And those are the questions that we want to receive from you today, and we hope that we'll be able to respond to the best of our knowledge. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to make the assumption that you have read the State of the Nation address. And shortly, I'll be posting in the chat room some key resources, if you'll allow me to do that for you now. It's a 15-point summary of the President's SONA, and that will help you to just have a quick overview of what the key points were, because I'll be very superficial at a high level, but I rely on you to read for the depth of the discussion. The second thing that I will post in our chat group is a report of government. It's called the Harambee Prosperity Plan End of Term Report. And that report really provides you a detailed update of what progress has done over what government has done over the term. There, I hope you can see it. And that should enable you to have a very clear synopsis of where we are in terms of the projects that we have committed ourselves to as government and how far we have come to attain those deliverables. I'll now begin pillar by pillar, only focusing on 4 pillars. On the governance pillar, the key report that was delivered by the President is that Namibia's governance architecture remains sound. Namibia is 4th on the continent for governance, effective governance, and this has been attributable over the 4 years to our public performance management system, the introduction of that, some key legislative reforms, investigations into the public tender irregularities, voluntary declaration of assets by political office bearers and senior government officials, and the open door media policy that government has maintained. The President affirmed government's commitment to continue to champion media freedoms and expressed that there is no lack of political will to fight corruption. There has been a strong commitment to uphold the separation of powers in the government, and also the President demonstrated the political commitment towards inclusion, youth inclusion, gender inclusion, and also political inclusion at large. On the state of the economy, we can summarize that the state of the economy is fragile. I should highlight that the president is summoned to lead a post-independent Namibia during one of the most difficult hours. And not only once, but twice, he's managed crisis after crisis. First was the 2016 global slowdown, which induced economic contractions. It was compounded by recurring droughts that lasted for over 5 years. And now we have a global health emergency that has become an economic pandemic as well. Government in the first term effected serious fiscal consolidation or cost containment measures in order to reduce and to stabilize the public finances. We can say that the fundamentals were in place and that green shoots of recovery were beginning to show. COVID is going to reverse those gains materially. The president expressed a lot of empathy in the SONA because he understands the impact, the pressure on business, on the loss of income, on workers, on livelihoods, especially in the worst affected sectors. To this end, government rolled out a stimulus package, or a relief package as well, valued at 8.1 billion, which is only an interim solution to mitigate the full impact of COVID on workers and businesses and industry. The president demonstrated a strong commitment to reduce the current high debt stock. The debt stock was reported by the Minister of Finance to go up to 64.8%, and the steep budget deficit of 12.5%, the highest since independence. This is not unique to Namibia. If you look at our two major neighbors, Angola and South Africa, they are also expected to rise significantly in their debt stock in response to the public health emergency. Generally, the president has responded for the second term that the government will formulate an economic recovery plan, and that this economic recovery plan is going to focus on 4 main pillars. The first pillar is to regain fiscal stability in the immediate term. The second pillar is structural economic reforms in order for us to stimulate recovery and growth. The third pillar is public sector reforms in order for us to rein in expenses and to stimulate and to stabilize the public finance situation. The final pillar is productivity, highlighting that the nations who are going to make it out of COVID are those that are going to become more productive. Under social progression, this is the pillar where government has exceeded its own targets. This is the pillar that talks to poverty alleviation, arresting hunger, poverty, key health indicators, key education indicators. The president reported that although the country is making inroads in arresting poverty and reducing poverty, Namibia has come down from 70% poverty in 1994 to 18% in 2016, with some severe pockets of poverty. But it's going to take more, and it's going to require structural economic reform in order for us to bridge the inequality gap, the gap between income and wealth. And this is because of the deeply embedded structural nature of our inequality. Fiscal policy can only do so much. The president reported phenomenal social indicators in terms of the progress we're making on social safety nets, arresting food poverty. We have exceeded the targets that government set for the delivery of urban land and housing. But we are so aware that the national backlog is much higher. Sanitation has also increased, and TVET, we nearly doubled the capacity of intake of that sector to create space for skills training. Infrastructure development, very briefly, the country has secured energy supply security through policy reforms and opening up for a renewable energy mix that introduced solar, diesel, and hydro into the mix. We had no load shedding. Taps did not run dry despite the drought. We have secured water supply security, but we do need to transform the sector for future sustainability. Namibia has world-class road infrastructure, ICT infrastructure. We are ranked #1 on the continent for our road network, and our ICT infrastructure poises the country very well for the 4th industrial revolution. Finally, on social cohesion and nationhood, the president emphasized, and we cannot underappreciate, the call for unity. We cannot overcome. We have to come together as a united front in order to overcome the challenges that are facing us. And also the president's issued a stern warning, a word of caution to young people to say, we must desist the retrogressive tendencies of tribalism and all those isms that threaten to take us back. This has been a very top-line summary of the State of the Nation address. We're now going to move into the plenary, where I'm going to invite our speakers to share their thinking in their fields of expertise on these subject matters. I'm going to begin with the development funding portfolio. I'm going to begin with Mr. Nkumbi, because the impact of COVID has really had a strong and negative impact on business and on labor, and also on those who are self-employed, the entrepreneurs, the informal sector, and the households. And I think it would be beneficial if you can, briefly highlight the response of government to mitigate the loss of income and livelihood thus far. Martin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Desiree, and the Office of the President for inviting me to the webinar, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to comment by firstly, maybe just giving a little bit of context of the role of the Development Bank of Namibia in the economy. And the role is really to support all economic activities by providing primarily finance to enterprises. So our role is to support economic development through entrepreneurs by providing financial capital for them to start and expand their business projects. As stated in the SONA by His Excellency the President, the country has been experiencing economic headwinds already since 2016. We here at the bank has been feeling it. Our clients, the borrowers and entrepreneurs that are operating out there in the economy have been feeling it, have been struggling. Their level of revenue generation capacity has been reduced. Many have been struggling to honor the repayment of their loans with the Development Bank. And that has culminated in a situation which the President has also outlined in the SONA, that unemployment stood at 33%, and particularly youth unemployment stood at 46.1%. That is the 2018 statistics that has been quoted. Now, with that situation that is starting from that period, at the bank, we have tried to align our lending focus to the development priorities of the government. We have focused our lending to the manufacturing sector, to the transport and logistics sector, and also to tourism or the hospitality industry. And if you look at our loan and investment portfolio, you will find that other than infrastructure, in particular renewable energy, those are the three sectors that has taken up the bulk of the DBN funding over the past 5 years as we speak. Now, the specific question has also been, what is DBN doing, especially for the youth? We have always said we have focused on providing financial capital to the youth, but then we needed to introduce specific products. We have recently, towards the end of last year, introduced the skills-based loan facility that is targeting particularly young people with either vocational training experience or those that have got a skill that they can implement. This product was launched in March this year, and we have actually started to receive applications for that particular, under that program. To date, we have received just over 60 loan applications. There was a little bit of a slack during the lockdown. We have also not been able to process some of those applications, but to date, we have actually approved 8 with a total loan amount of about 4.5 million. And that process of assessing those skills-based facility loans is ongoing, which is focusing particularly on young people, young entrepreneurs that are starting or expanding their businesses. And we're talking about people under the age of 35 at the time of approval, with a proviso that we can also look at older entrepreneurs. That is on the skills-based facility. Come COVID-19 and the economic and the lockdown, that has serious negative impact on economic activities. And we, DBN, had also responded with measures. The first thing that we did as a bank was to allow repayment holidays. The first repayment holiday that was granted effective from March, April, May was full repayment holiday on loan capital and interest rates to all our SME borrowers. And we also extended the same repayment holidays to large enterprises that are in the hospitality and tourism industry, with the proviso that anybody else, any other enterprise that is struggling due to the impact of the pandemic could also apply for relief measures. And we have received quite a number of requests, and we have actually granted most of those. As the situation unfolded, we have seen that the impact of the lockdown is still prevailing, and it's going to be prevailing for the foreseeable future. We have recently expanded or extended the repayment holidays to the end of September. For our SMEs, we have extended the repayment holiday on capital repayment up to the end of September. And to our clients or enterprises that are operating in the hospitality industry, that basically means hotels, restaurants, bed and breakfast. That repayment holiday has been extended in full capital plus interest repayment also to the end of September. Those are some of the relief measures that DBN has immediately implemented, but we also continue to entertain and grant loan restructuring or repayment holidays to any other enterprise that is finding it difficult to honor its obligations because of the slowdown in economic activities. So I've talked about the skills-based facility. I've also talked about the relief measures. I can quickly go on to talk about the 500 million non-agricultural loan scheme that has also been introduced by the government to be delivered through the Development Bank of Namibia as part of relief measures for entrepreneurs that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have started preparing ourselves for that. In fact, as we speak, we have submitted the draft government guarantee to the Ministry of Finance. They are looking at it. We hope that that will be issued soon before the end of this month. We have already engaged both local financial institutions and international DFIs to raise the necessary capital, and we have received quite attractive offers. We will hopefully in the next 1 or 2 weeks conclude or select potential funders. We have got some good offers that will enable the bank to extend these 500 million non-agricultural loans, particularly with a focus on SMEs, to interest rates well below prime. And so that 500 million rolled out very soon. So at the bank, we have prepared ourselves. The moment the guarantee has been issued, the information booklets and the application processes has already been outlined. That will be announced, and entrepreneurs can start to request loans under that scheme. The aim and objective of these loans is basically to assist enterprises that, because of the slowdown in economic activities, they are unable, for example, to meet their working capital requirements. They may not even be able to pay salaries, they may not be able to pay for rent, and they may not even be able to meet the day-to-day operational expenses that they need. They can then come to the bank under that scheme, be granted working capital for the period that they need, hopefully until the economic environment has improved such that they are able to operate normally and generate the kind of revenue that they expected. So that is the one aim and objective of this 500 million non-agricultural loan scheme. The other objective is also to assist those enterprises who need to reposition or restructure their businesses because the situation and the environment have changed. It's no longer business as usual. they will have to maybe change the line of business, and they need capital to reconfigure their business. So that non-agricultural loan scheme has got those two main objectives. So I think I'll probably stop here. I know I had 4 minutes. So just in summary, I talked about the role of the development bank. I talk about the focus on loans to young entrepreneurs, specifically the skills-based facility that has been introduced. For that, we have already started basically receiving applications, assessing and giving loans. I also then have talked about the loan moratorium, repayment moratoriums or relief measures that the bank has granted. And I have also touched on the 500 million non-agricultural loan that the bank will be rolling out soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to park it there. We've got Patrick from the Arts Council. We've got Freddie from the Sport Commission. We know that these are among the sectors that have been adversely affected, and we would like to hear how those stakeholders can benefit from the relief that government has made provision for. I want to call on our Honorable Deputy Minister, Emma Theophilus. You're coming from Parliament. Thank you very much for making the time to be here during the parliamentary debate. There have been the defense of the budgets specifically made towards ministries and sectors that have an interest and a stake in youth development. Some young people have submitted their questions in advance, and they're arguing that the Ministries of Industrialization and Trade and the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Youth, these are ministries that seem to be underfunded at a very critical time. Can you talk to us more a little bit about the budget, the allocations, your views, and maybe in general what you think about access to information?
Thank you very much, Daisy. Good afternoon, fellow panelists and all those that are listening from home or wherever you find yourself. Thank you for the questions. So yes, right now Parliament is dealing with the budget. We are going vote by vote and going through debates on the allocations made to the different ministries and other government offices and agencies. There has been a contention around the defense budget, mainly because some people of the view that that money could be better allocated to other areas, like you said, Deji, agriculture, Ministry of Youth, or even industrialization, to try to assist with the current social problems being faced, but also around the current economic situation we find ourselves. I think the debates did move towards to say that every ministry, regardless whether it's urban and rural development or even health, those pockets of people who do still feel that the budget allocation is not sufficient for a certain ministry that they think is important. I think the Minister of Finance had a very task to do to balance the needs at a time such as this. And I think for the most part, he has done very well. With regards to the defense budget, the Minister of Defense articulated to say that it is difficult to maintain a soldier. There's retraining that happens over periods of time. There's more that we don't see at the face or at face value with the military. Like, for example, he even presented a radio produced here in Namibia and assembled here in Namibia to try to be used in the operations of the military. So I think perhaps because of the nature of the military, we might not always understand what's going on. But I do think it is valid for those who argue that, for example, agriculture or youth should be able to get more funding, because if you look at the budget votes of those two ministries, you look at, for example, Ministry of Youth, they have a credit scheme, and the Minister of Youth, Sports and National Service motivated her budget today, and I think the discussions are ongoing. In her budget motivating speech, speaks about programs that are meant to upskill the skills of young people, but also credit schemes that are supposed to ensure that, for example, young people get equipment for entrepreneurial issues. So maybe that's that for the budgetary debate and allocation. I want to touch on access to information, and thank you for asking that question, because next week, Tuesday, my minister will be tabling the Access to Information Bill. And this is quite important because I've always been a proponent of information, the more informed you are, the better decisions you're able to make, whether it's decisions for your life or decisions to be able to advise on what they do. But of course, having information is also important when you have situations of misinformation and disinformation, which have shown their ugly head during this COVID-19 pandemic, that information, true or not, can be easily be misconstrued and cause a lot of panic and cause a lot of harm. And I think that's important to highlight. But more importantly, I think it has allowed, or it will allow, people to be more active citizens in the decisions being made by institutions of governance, and be able to advise or be able to interact and be able to guide those that are making decisions on their behalf. But lastly, I realize my time is quite thin. I want to talk a little bit about the plans around the broadband policy. COVID-19 exposed a lot of the challenges around our digital divide, whether in urban or rural areas. And as a ministry, and this have been plans, and you'll see on Monday when my minister motivates his budget vote, a lot of the money is going towards the broadband policy and instituting a broadband policy committee to be able to align the different institutions to ensure that we have spectrum around especially the rural areas. And I'm talking about the secluded and far-reaching regions such as the down south in Karas region, all the way towards Zambezi and especially Kunene region. But also, secondly, we have a digital strategy that we are working on. This includes a lot of things, even around crisis communication plan. We are planning on the social media use policy and all these areas. But the idea is to be able to coordinate how, as the world is moving towards its fourth industrial revolution, how we cannot be caught with our pants down with around how the digital space is being utilized and how we can capitalize it to improve service delivery in the country. Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you, Emma. I'm sure we'll come back to that. You've given us a lot in your initial statement. I want to touch now and move to agriculture, because agriculture is one of the sectors that generates the most jobs for young people in the country. Because of the droughts in 2018, we suffered about 48,000 job losses, predominantly from agriculture, and then also retail and fishing, but predominantly agriculture. I want to hear from you, because a lot of young people say that the cost of access to land is so prohibitive, and also the cost to develop land and to be productive is just, the challenges are so many. I think what COVID-19, what the lockdown regulations have exposed once again is the food insecurity that really makes our country vulnerable to imports, and that more has to be done, can be done, will be done to boost productive capacity. Young people are interested in the value chain. Maybe you can share with them the points of entry into agriculture.
Yeah, no, thank you, Daisy. My intervention is going to be, I think, on one hand, sharing some information on what is available, but on the other hand as well, it's going to be some form of advisory, especially to the young people. Our mandate as Agribank is to finance agriculture and to finance the entire value chain of agriculture. And that basically means financing from primary production to value addition. So primary production, as you have basic land, and then you can either rear cattle or other livestock, or you can plant vegetables or crops. And at the other end, you are actually processing those products into a finished product, such as juice or processed meat and so on. And we finance that entire value chain. I think that, in a nutshell, is really our mandate, and we try and extend affordable financing so that at least the loans are not as expensive as you would get from a commercial bank, and that is really what it is. I think the statistics around youth unemployment are well known. It's also well known that the economy has been in recession for a good part of the last 5 to 6 years. And what we need to do is really make sure that we stimulate key sectors in the economy. And I think agriculture is really one of those sectors. And if you look at the employment statistics, I think agriculture, even if it has gone down in terms of its contribution, 23% of all employment in this country is still coming from agriculture. And there is huge potential in that sector. But I think there's a couple of touch points we actually need to deal with. And the first one for me is around access to land. And access to land, I think we need to maybe debate whether we should focus on access to land in combination with land ownership, because one doesn't always need to own the land to be productive with it and also to create jobs. And I think we need to be open-minded and say, let's try and deal with access to land in communal areas where we can have projects that can deliver. Let's try and open up access to the green schemes land that is available throughout the country and can be used for youth. Let's try and open up access to land in resettlement farms across the country and make that available for the young people, while of course at the same time, looking at providing loans for young people to acquire, commercial farmland as well. And the thing with commercial land is that there has been an explosion in prices over the last number of years, the slowdown in the economy. But it is expensive, and we need to look at entry points that are less expensive. And I think if we have, and I think it's a policy matter. Well, we need to make land facilitate that in the green schemes and facilitate that on resettlement farms. I do understand there's quite a number of resettlement farms that have that we need markets and access to market institutions. Find a way of really securing that and tying it up so that when young people produce or when other producers in the country produce, they have a market. Then I think from a policy perspective is close happening already. But if you produce more inside, then you can close the borders. And I think maybe just one point before I come to what we are providing as the bank, we need to also change our attitude towards agriculture. So agriculture is pretty much for gray-haired people at the moment. And I think young people need to show interest as well. And that would be my advice to young people to really not just look at agriculture as, of thing, but something that can really provide jobs and can provide food security and secure livelihoods in this country. I think that's an important point. At the bank, we do provide loans and loan products for young people. We actually have targets that we have set as a bank that every year, X% of all our new disbursements must be for young people. But of course, it requires young people also to take advantage of those. In this last financial year, for example, that ended March 2020, 28% of all our disbursements in that year actually went to people that are below the age of 35. And that is quite pleasing. And my invitation is really for young people to show interest, to flood us with proposals, because I to be honest, I really don't see a lot of those proposals coming through. And I think if they come through, whatever the shortcomings may be in those proposals, we'll be able to advise. And I'm sure we'll be able to make a case to our board to prioritize, these applications from young people. So we've got a number of products. Some of them require collateral, which those young people who can provide it will provide it. Some of them are collateral free, and some young people are working and may want to engage in agriculture as well. So we can have salary-backed deductions. And then some young people don't work, and we have also collateral free loan products for young people in communal areas that actually do not have any collateral to offer. and we would assist them also in terms of how to shape up, their business plans or their plans to go into agriculture. But it does require commitment. It does require a lot of hard work. And I think the young people must really just stand up and come and have a chat. And, we can address the problem of youth unemployment in this country.
Thank you very much, Tatesaki. There you have it, guys. I'm not sure how many of you were aware of the specific youth products at the Agribank that accommodate working, full-time employed and unemployed youth, non-collateralized lending products in agribusiness. The invitation has been extended. I'm going to call on Mr. Nabimane Shipanga. He's from the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, and he's standing in for Dr. Huma Bindu, who is unable to make it, because definitely our SME strategy has to do with industrialization, manufacturing, and adding value to our own goods and services. We have prioritized this as one of the government strategies that can generate job creation and economic growth through SMEs. And I want the colleagues to talk to us about the programs that are in place to support enterprise development, SME development, especially now, given the challenges that SMEs are facing.
Good afternoon, panelists. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much. Like Desiree have said, my name is Nafimane Shipanga. I'm with the Ministry of Industrialization, the division responsible for SME development. So, but I am standing on behalf of my boss, Dr. Michael Huma Bindu. I'm not going to talk about the mandate of the ministry. Instead, I will go straight to the point. Our responsibility is to support small enterprises. And since 2015, when the economic situation has gone down, the budget for enterprise development was significantly affected. And as a result, all the support services that we had, including the famous equipment aid, was halted. So what happened was that in 2015, when we were reviewing the MSME policy, there were quite a lot of issues that came out. One is that all our support services we had did not have monitoring and evaluation attached to them. As a result, we have spent so much money. For example, I would say between 2009 and 2015, we spent over 100 million on equipment aids. And in the same period, we spent over 60 million on business plans and feasibility studies. But if you ask us today, where are those businesses we have supported? Most of them are not operational. Now the question is why? So what I'm trying to point out here is that the government has done quite well in terms of supporting MSMEs, but maybe the approach is what was not right. Therefore, in our MSME policy review, there was a strong recommendation that we do a process re-engineering so that we focus on coordination approach of supporting MSMEs instead of each and every institution is doing its own. Like I've said, all the programs are now halted because of the financial situation. The ministry did not just end it there. In fact, we have now what is called the Agri program. Maybe just if you can allow me, just a brief introduction of what the Agri program is and what it tries to offer. What happened is that in the United Nations wanted to understand why some entrepreneurs succeed in business while others fail, even if they are in the same economy. So they had a professor in psychology to do a study, and that study revealed that all successful entrepreneurs have similar competencies and they behave in certain ways, while all the unsuccessful entrepreneurs lack those competencies and they behave in different ways. So now this program was designed to change the way entrepreneurs behave in general so that they behave in accordance to the behaviors associated with successful entrepreneurship. So the whole program is about the mindset change. So on top of this program, there are three components attached to it. One of it is access to finance, the other one is access to the market, and the other one is business linkages. Like Mr. Ingumi has said, that the issue is that opportunities might be there, but the market is the challenge. And now this program is in all those components to try and assist the entrepreneur. The mindset entrepreneurs and business have died. They will say, I didn't have market. Some will say, the equipment have died and I didn't have enough money to repair them. So now this program will teach entrepreneurs on how do you deal with these situations. So for the interest of time, instead maybe just to make it short, is that the Agritech program does not only teach you how to do business, it teaches you how to behave in the way that will make sure that your business does not end where it is. So that is the current program that we are running right now. And we started last year. We have trained so far 87 entrepreneurs with those business skills from the formal sector, and we have trained 40 entrepreneurs from the informal sector. Those are coming from the Ministry of Poverty, the beneficiaries of the food bank. The idea behind it was that there are people who are getting food for free, but they are doing small business on the side. So they were brought in into the program to teach them how to move from where they are in order to become serious entrepreneurs and eventually move into the mainstream of the economy.
Thank you very much. I hope you can start to see because definitely Mr. Nkumbi at the DBN can confirm that the SME fatality rate is very high, and that talks to the support through programs like Empretech that needs to be given to businesses to succeed, the sustainability model. I want to now shift to Vuyo, and we've discussed agriculture, we've discussed ICT, we have also looked at our industrialization agenda. And some of the questions that we have from the young people in the pre-submission, they're saying, which sectors do we need to prioritize? What should Namibia's recovery plan look like? Is it energy? Is it renewables? Is it agriculture? Is it construction? Where should we throw the very limited resources that we have to transform the economy and to create the needed jobs for our young people? Vuyo, as a member of the high-level panel, you were involved in a lot of the thinking on what we need to do to unlock mass employment. Please share your thinking with us on what a future trajectory could look like.
Great. Good afternoon, panelists and the participants. It's a great pleasure to be able to contribute to this inaugural webinar. And the work that we've done as a panel have identified certain evidence-based constraints that we see in the economy. And I guess there would be two buckets. The one would be the policy constraint in terms of how do we make sure that we streamline the implementation of the policy, because what we've learned is that Namibia has the best policies, they are ready, but the implementation of those policies is a problem. So therefore, that needs to be on government to-do list to say, how do we remove these policy barriers that will then help us unlock the potential of the different sectors. But also what you do find is that you do have a very active private sector, but it's also not coming to the party in being also implementing some of these opportunities that will prioritize the jobs, and that would also prioritize certain productive industries that will stimulate economic growth. And so with implementation on both sides, you can be able to use the assets that you currently have, because you do have assets that you can be able to leverage to actually ignite economic growth. What is needed is action. And I'm glad that also the mindset is quite an important thing that has been identified from the Department of Industrialization and Trade, because we also recognize that when you start thinking big projects, people are scared and they tend to say, well, this is too big for us. And therefore there needs to be that confidence to be able to say that actually we can be able to start somewhere and be able to scale up and be able to then get projects that can move the needle, because you're not going to move the needle with smaller projects that are not going to be able to have market access, that are not going to be able to interest financiers to actually be able to put money into them to be able to make sure that there's going to be a return. So Namibia therefore has to look at current consumption, because you have quite a lot of imports from South Africa, which you can actually do for yourself, as COVID-19 has actually shown that most of the stuff you can be able to do, you don't have to be importing. But secondly, to focus on export-based kind of markets, so that so you can be able to attract foreign currency into the country and foreign investment, and you're able to build your reserves so you can have your monetary sovereignty, because right now you're pegged to the rand. To through export-based, be able to have that independence. So what are the key industries? Agriculture is critical, because when we look at greening Namibia as one of the key things we've suggested as the high-level panel, is that greening Namibia, where you can be able to make sure you can attract foreign funding, you can be able to utilize land that is not productive, that is not going to compete with agriculture, to be able to come up with your camp plants, to use your invasive bush as biomass. You can be able to have solar and biomass to be able to create the peak power, and also be able to use the biomass to create variety of products like green gas, like green fuels, and also green electricity and plastic polymers and so forth. So you have a very great opportunity from greening to be able to catalyze various industry, but it requires agriculture as a base. And why is agriculture important? Because it enables you to have security, food security. And also with agriculture, you need to be able to have agriculture where you have sources of water, because water security is an important thing. And then you can be able to scale up once you've been able to identify the agricultural in places where there's water, and where you're able to also deal with food security. And then you can deal with energy security in terms of using agriculture not to have only single crops, like you're saying maize. No, you need to have multiple diversified income streams to be able to withstand all these headwinds that we've seen hitting the country. And therefore, agriculture is important, because you can be able to integrate fourth industrial revolution. You can be able to then be more efficient in terms of your input cost by using fourth industrial revolution. And also, you can be able to look at export markets and so forth, and be able to have it sustainable by looking at different streams of income. So therefore, agriculture is important, but value addition is also important. You can beneficiate a lot, because what we found that your primary industries, you're exporting a lot of raw materials, and in the mining sector. And so the reason why that is happening is because you don't have energy security. And therefore, but if you're able to then use agriculture to give you energy security by being able to plant other crops that don't compete with food, then you're able to provide energy. Then you're able to provide the capacity to be able to do value addition. And that's one of the things that we've been emphasizing, to saying when you have value addition, you're able to create manual jobs, and that can then be able to, especially in the northern regions where you have high youth unemployment and where there's a vast amount of land, you can actually be able to utilize that as an asset. What it all requires, one, mindset change. Agriculture is actually sexy, because it is what is going to give you food security, is going to give you energy security, and is going to allow Namibia to leapfrog when it comes to climate change, because Namibia can be able to utilize even the arid land to be able to create new industries. It's just going to require a mindset change. And you need to have runners that are going to be able to take those opportunities. You're not going to create jobs having a full-time job somewhere else. You can't moonlight and run an agricultural module. You have to have people that are going to be invested with their skin in the game, with their souls in the game, and be able to have all these multiple income sources to be able to then be sustainable and be able to generate economic growth. So you do need young people that are going to be taking the risks, that are going to be then supported by the current instruments that government has. But it takes two parties to come together. Government has done, to be honest, has done a lot of things, but you also need entrepreneurs coming to the party. And then I'll talk about NEF perhaps later on in the discussion, because at the core of this, we also need to have economic transformation. Namibia cannot be able to have growth that is not equitably shared amongst everybody. You can't have the richer getting richer and the poorer getting poorer. So NIEF as a policy condition is critical. But who's going to drive NIEF? Young people need to be at the forefront of coming up with the initiatives. The private sector right now hasn't seemingly embraced NIEF, but it's very important. Without NIEF, you're not going to be able to create that impact. So NIEF will enable to decrease those income inequalities. So in a nutshell, agriculture is critical, and greening helps you to be able to integrate all the different elements in terms of water, energy, agriculture, and the fourth industrial revolution. And these are ingredients that have to be driven by young people.
Thanks, Vuyo. Always passionate. For the benefit of our participants, NIEF stands for the Namibia Economic Empowerment Framework, Equitable Economic Empowerment Framework. It is now a bill that has been consulted extensively, and in the State of the Nation address, the President implored the House of Parliament to enact the bill once it is tabled. NIEF has got 5 pillars. It's a transformational framework. It will not only look at the ownership component in terms of equity ownership, but it also has some very progressive pillars on innovation, building the management capacity of Namibians, enterprise development, and some community responsibility. What I want to emphasize about NIEF is that we want to see young Namibians, if not owning the productive assets of the economy, then at least they must be managing it. And we do think that we can achieve transformation in this way. And this is the only way to close the wealth gap. As you were talking about agriculture as a possible vehicle to leapfrog, the chat room is on fire, and people are saying, market access, where do we put our products? We're producing this, we're producing that, there are no off-takers. And we have Helia here from the Central Procurement Board of Namibia. The government consumes at least 65% of the market. It's such a large market, and we really can leverage that procurement muscle to stimulate our small enterprises. And that is why we've got the procurement board here. We have a very transformative, reformed act that was passed in 2016 and now operationalized. Helia, talk to us about what is in the act and what work you're doing to create opportunities for Namibian enterprise.
Thank you, Desiree, and good afternoon to the fellow panelists. When you are dealing with market access in regards to procurement, you need to take cognizance of the Public Procurement Act. Just for the participants that are not aware of how the Act works and how Central Procurement Board of Namibia plays a role in public procurement. The Act was gazetted in 2015. However, it only became effective from 1st of April 2017. Now, in the enactment of the Act, the Central Procurement Board, as a body responsible as a procuring agent for public entity, was created. Now, you need to bear in mind that the Central Procurement Board is a procuring agent for public entities. We are looking at state-owned enterprises. We are looking at OMAS, which is the offices, ministries, and agency of the government. Now, in so doing, we want the Central Procurement Board can only be responsible for procuring on behalf of public entities, which means it's the public entities that need to, on a year-on-year basis, to develop in the annual procurement plans. They need to develop this annual procurement plan, which indicates their interest in what they need to procure. And this, by all means, will create market access for the Namibian citizens. So if we take agriculture, for instance, as rightly stated by the speaker before me, Mr. Vuyo, agriculture is an industry that the most public entities can procure, and especially when we look at the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education has a high national school feeding program that takes up foods and provide food programs to students. And we can rightfully procure foods and agricultural products from our local producers and from your AMTES and from the small and medium enterprises that are producing agricultural produce. But for us to do that, they must obviously fall now within the threshold of the Central Procurement Board. If you're not aware, the Public Procurement Act sets certain limits of thresholds that permits who can procure or which agent can procure on behalf. There's thresholds for the Central Procurement Board depending on whether it's goods or services that is being procured. In respect of goods, there's also a limitation as to which entity falls under which threshold. So we can start at 10 million, then only it comes to Central Procurement Board, or 15 million or 20 million, depending on the threshold sets out in the Act. But there is opportunities, and it's up to the public entity. I just briefly mentioned the Ministry of Education with the school feeding program. You've got the correctional services. They also produce food, and they are able to procure food locally. They can create an opportunity for market access for Namibians. But in so doing, we need to engage, or we need to enforce the Namibian citizens or producers to try and be suppliers basically to the market. Don't just wait for a bid to come out in order for you to go into agriculture. Like Mr. Nikemba has indicated, we need the youth to be more active. Don't let agriculture be for the grayer hair citizens. Let it also be a youth empowering provision in order to ensure economic development in the country. But the Central Procurement Board is there and is able to procure on behalf of the public entity, depending on the threshold that is available for the need of procurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilia. We also saw last year the Minister of Finance issue directives for the preferential procurement of agri produce in our correctional facilities and hospitals, and we are being very intentional. I think what we need to strengthen the experience that you're highlighting is that sometimes the supply is also, the capacity needs to be built up on the downstream so that we can satisfy the volumes that are being demanded for by government. And that is the collective effort of the Ministry of Industrialization and all the stakeholders. We talked extensively about agriculture as one of the priority sectors for economic recovery and job creation. I have on the panel Patrick Sam and Mr. Freddie Muya. A lot of young people have gifts that have to do with culture, arts, and they want to sustain a livelihood out of their God-given gifts. I want to hear from the two colleagues in terms of the progress that has made, but also the challenges that are being experienced in those two sectors, what we can do to improve the sustainability of these economic sectors as well. Music and entertainment is a sector. Sports is an industry that can create jobs and sustain livelihood. I will invite Patrick Sam and then followed directly by Mr. Freddie Muya. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and good afternoon to Desiree as well as the panelists and everybody else that's joining in the conversation. I think these platforms are important because as a democracy, public participation, I think it leads to better decision making. And so I think I want to applaud David Caesar's office in regard to that. In response to Sona, I think the 5 things that I want to summarize very quickly are, what are the opportunities of mobility for young people? What is the opportunity for growth if we're more organized as companies? What are the opportunities for profits, for development, and for equity? I think those are 5 things in terms of what people expect as outcomes. So as a Namibian, in terms of upward mobility, and not just as a Namibian, but as an African, we have, what we call this huge upsurge in young people's numbers. Opportunities of employment are provided to half the people, and half don't have these opportunities. So what happens to the other half, I think, is the ability to get them to a certain sense of well-being. And that's what we determine as mobility. So even if you are born poor, how do I end up in a place of a livelihood, right? And this is where people question economic schools of thought and say, well, in Namibia, in grade 10, if half of us don't succeed, if half of us don't do well in the mainstream education system, if only 12% of the population transcends to higher education, what happens to the rest of the children? Do they have opportunities of employment or income, or a certain level of value in terms of contribution to the household? So the big question I want to ask is, a lot of young people aren't educated. A lot of young people don't have the capital. They don't have resources that are available. So what opportunities exist for them? And in a country, when it comes to the issue of equality, I think that's a very important question. And to make it blunt, what opportunities exist for young people that are not educated? Are they out of the value chain of the economy? And I think that's an important thing. So this is where the arts and the culture and the creative industry comes in. Now, there's a lot of myths that I quickly want to debunk about, when we talk about growth and how an economy is set up. An economy is set up on basically meeting, it's the flow of goods and services, how we allocate resources, ultimately to meet our needs and our wants. Now, as human beings, we have certain needs. We need a place to sleep, we need food to eat, and we need water and shelter and things like that, our basic needs. That, in terms of our constitutional demand of pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of dignity, don't really match. Like, some of us make it, but most of us don't. So what I'm trying to say here is that the stakes of what we are doing is not to provide access or to make services available, but it is ultimately to allow most Namibians to have a pursuit of happiness, to allow most Namibians to have ability to have mobility or growth or development as a nation. So what stimulates that within our sector is creativity. So if you're looking at most of the developed countries, what drives, because we're talking about economic growth. Economic growth is not driven by just meeting our needs. Economic growth is also driven by meeting people's wants, people's desires. I mean, if you look at the largest public investment fund of the Saudis, once COVID hit, they spent more than 250 billion in entertainment. They bought live events. They bought the ships, that were sunk. So even a country with the most economic mobility uses the idea of meeting people's wants to stimulate economic growth, right? So people want music, people want movies, people want fashion, people want, and so we have to demystify that economic growth comes from just meeting your people's needs. And I think that's why we're not able to get the correct drivers to stimulate what happens in other countries where the digital migration happens. So there's a rebate on SSD cards and bringing in, like studios with highest quality. I mean, Mad Max was shot in Namibia. Do we even know the economic value of Mad Max and what it contributed to this country? So I think from a systemic perspective, to keep it short, one is we need the correct knowledge. I don't think we have the correct knowledge right now. I think we have most of the knowledge we need, but I think there's a lot of knowledge that we don't have about what determines mobility, what actually stimulates growth, what ensures development in terms of social, economic, environmental, what is the issues around equity, who benefits from these loans that we speak about at Development Bank? Who are the people at the Development or Agricultural Bank? Are it the same people that have access in other areas in terms of the economy and equity? So the system is not necessarily right. So do we have the right knowledge? Are the systems in terms of institutional arrangements placed correctly? So I would say part of the problem is the agricultural ministry or the information ministry need to intersect with technology and to say agribusiness. How do we innovate agribusiness with technology, for instance? So sometimes the system is outdated in the way that it operates, and it's not more cross-cutting. It's not intersectional, for lack of a better word. And then the last part is the services that we are providing. Are the services, like we heard with the SME example, are we getting the returns on our investment? And sometimes you're not getting the returns on investment because a large part of the sectors in developing countries focus on supply of goods, but we don't focus on demand, right? Where does the demand come from? The market access. So I think that story needs to be told. Why do I need to wear, for instance, an African shirt to work? Because if the company's policy says you must wear a button-up shirt and there's no retail policy that says I can wear an African shirt, then I can't go to Mimi Shilongo for her to make me a shirt to wear to work. So I think we have to rethink who is the economy for, what and who, like in the sense of how do we then make it more inclusive to ensure that people just don't have access, things aren't just available, but we have to focus on how we utilize the resources. And I want to make the argument for the culture and the creative industries to say a large part of what's going to drive any sector, whether it's agriculture, in terms of competition, whether it is tourism, it's going to be the stories. It's going to be how we tell the stories. Why is Namibia lucrative? Why is Namibia, So thank you. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Thank you so much. Always passionate. What I want to highlight, I'm not a speaker, I'm a moderator, is that definitely the creative services provides quite a low-cost sector that can create jobs. It's not as capital intensive as other sectors, for example, mining. I want to share with the audience that government has formulated a services industry policy. We are all very familiar with our growth at home strategy, which is an industrialization agenda. We have now also formulated a services industry policy that can look at ways to build ICT firms and creative industry and culture-based type of services. There we go. I now want to give Freddie, you've got strictly 4 minutes, and Sam, I'll allow you to speak finally for 4 minutes. We want to make use of this time, we want to make better use of this time so that we have ample time for the Q&A. We've got a lot of young people who want to engage all of you, so please try to be succinct. Freddie Muya. Freddie, are you there? If not,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity that you've given to the sport industry. Yeah, when we look at the sport industry in many countries, especially in Southern Africa, we look at this industry as a very small industry. But I would like to give a little bit background that if you go to West Africa, you go to East Africa, and you go to Europe, it's one of the greatest industries that can contribute to employment creation. It is the industry meant for gifted learners. It is an industry meant also for less gifted learners. It's open to all. And if you look now in our country as it stands today, we look at the sport industry being allocated a very small amount of money when it comes to national budget. However, if we would also look for the past 29 years, I do not think there is any time that it was even allocated close to $1 billion. But if we would like to create employment opportunity, there is a need for us to ensure that at least we invest much in this sport industry. Why I'm saying so is celebrities of today, I believe all of us, we know celebrities of today that can be able to do a lot of investment in countries. They come from the sport industries. Celebrities of today, we can give very good examples of Ronaldo's, how much they've invested in their own countries. So if we would also invest in sports, we know out of one investment that we make to a child in sport, that child that we invest, we put money into an investment, that child, we know by the end of the day, this child will be able, when he becomes a sports person and he becomes a professional, he can be able to employ quite a number of people within one industry. What I was also trying to look at is we are trying now by all means to professionalize sport in Namibia. And we've started with this exercise that we can be able to professionalize sport, that many of our youth, they can be able to value sport. Many of our parents can also be able to value sports. Because out of sport, we know we've got quite a number of people are gifted, quite a number of people have got great God-given talent. And if we can be able to nurture this talent, and these people, definitely they can be able to sustain themselves and also be able to create employment for many. If we look currently now in the Namibian setting, we have got boxing, professional boxing, where many of our young people, they are self-employed. We have got cricket that we play in this country, which is also a professional setting. We can also look about how many soccer players that we have in this country. And we've got also through sport, we can create direct employment and we can also create indirect employment. Because why I'm talking about indirect employment, because through sports itself, it also contributes in terms of whereby it can also be able to attract foreign direct investment by sport tourism. Because by having good athletes in the country, let's look like a very good example, like in Kenya. We know what Kenya is doing. You find that now there's an influx of many people just going to Kenya because they would like to go and see sports personalities, sport heroes, and in return, that also open up the industry of tourism because many people now can be able to also generate income out of it. So when we're looking now, I was so happy when the Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, she mentioned that in Parliament today, as they are debating, they are talking about the industry of agriculture, they're talking about the industry of sport and youth, that there is a need for more allocation to be done to that given sport. Indeed, it's true. I believe that once we could also invest much money into sport industry, we could be able to create employment opportunities. As we look about NDP 5, within the sport industry, we are thinking that come 2020-22, there is a need for us at least for sport industry to contribute at least 2% in terms of employment creation. But I was also looking at the statistics that was given by Namibian Statistics Agency. And when I was looking at statistics, they did not actually even put statistics in terms of sport, how sport contributes to employment creation. There are quite a number of people that are employed in sport, direct employment, and there are quite a number of people that are employed in sport under indirect employment. I think if we bring that statistics together, the figure in terms of youth unemployment is going to give us a different rate by that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Sam, please come in. I want you as a young person to advance the general plight, but also to speak specifically to the education experience during COVID and that the digital inclusion, or rather the digital divide that has been more pronounced now. Talking about digital literacy and the cost of data and accessing information. And then I want you to touch on the social cohesion elements that the president highlighted in Parliament, to say that he thinks it is us young people who are propagating tribalism. What are some of your responses to these as a NAM youth?
Yeah, thank you, Desiree, and also the President for this opportunity. Good afternoon, panelists and Namibian youth watching from all over the country and around the world. Yeah, thank you for the questions posed. I thought I would share a couple of reflections as well, pertaining to really generally youth entrepreneurship. As you mentioned, one of the things that I do is I have an organization where we focus really strongly on developing leadership around entrepreneurship and community development. And one of our key learnings from there has really been that a persistent need is really the need of skills transfer. We see that a lot of young people have incredible ideas, but some of the skills that one needs in order to start a business are simple things like knowing what your value proposition is, market testing, branding. Some of the young people start businesses without knowing some of these things. And of course, they can be learned via, trial and error. But if there are people who have already succeeded in business, we think there's an important need to pair up these people with the young people so that there's effective skills transfer there. The second reflection I want to share is really on the incubation of small businesses. We know that running a business is a very costly exercise, from human personnel, from paying for personnel, but then also all the other costs that come. So I think a stronger focus and providing environment for incubation is very, very important, especially until these businesses break even, because we all know that it also takes quite a while, especially in a country like Namibia, for businesses to break even. And closely tied with incubation is really the risk. We know that starting a business comes with great risks, and a lot of the times young people and their businesses do not really have the capacity to absorb those risks. So looking at possible risk transfers or mitigation, but also transfers between smaller and larger companies, I think it's an important element. And really the last thing that was also kind of touched on was just really the clear gap in the market for funding and deliberate policies that ensure that young people have access to markets. There is no use in me producing a product if it's not going to end up on a shelf. There is no use in a young person receiving entrepreneurial training, but then they come back to operate in a system that doesn't allow them to thrive, that doesn't allow them to move forward. So really deliberate actions, like were mentioned before, towards ensuring, number one, market access, but then also ensuring that the system at large changes. Speaking on the digital divide and education, I think one of the issues that we need to look at education is really what we are teaching our young people, what the universities are teaching, and whether the courses and the topics that they're teaching, number one, is relevant to the market, but also whether what they're being taught fosters a culture of innovation, fosters a culture of initiative, fosters a culture of being a self-starter. And I think that is very, very important as we are aiming to build and cultivate a culture of entrepreneurship. If we're sending young people to universities to get degrees, but they are not taught, or rather not even encouraged to be self-starters, then we don't expect those young people, or rather can't expect those young people to start businesses after they've graduated, because they were not capacitated in that line. So I think there's a huge mismatch between what our industry needs and what we are teaching our young people. And I think there's a need for certain courses in our universities to phase out and possibly be replaced with more relevant courses. And on the digital divide, we know that, of course, with the moving forward of technology, that will cause immense digital divides. And I think that is one of the things that COVID-19 has shown us. And being a country with such high levels of inequality, I think it's imperative that as we are moving forward, we keep looking at the people that are most left behind. Those are the people that we need to use as benchmarks, whether we're doing well or not. And I think there's been a constant need. A lot of organizations have been working on this, but there's been a constant need and a constant call to hold classes because not a lot of young people have access to ICT. But of course, we also understand from an institutional perspective that they need to continue with classes. But I think the real question then is, who are the people in our communities that are most marginalized, most left behind, and what are their views? And if we are going to continue with education online and continue leaving the ones that are already left behind, even behind, then that doesn't serve anyone. It really just increases the inequality that we are already experiencing. Quickly on social cohesion, I think there are a couple of issues, a couple of things that foster social cohesion. And number one, there is a spirit of belonging. And I think as young Namibians, constantly, I think for leadership at the national level, constantly working to ensure that we have a sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging can be improved through platforms like this. Consultation is definitely one way of ensuring social belonging, but then also inclusion in decision-making and on various platforms. I think it's important to work towards social belonging, and then through there we can foster better cohesion. And I think Namibian youth are doing generally well. Although there are a few loud ones that are tribalistic, I would like to believe that for the larger part, a lot of them are really passionate about this country. And we have seen on the events that happen on social media and even off of social media that a lot of young people are really able to rally together behind a certain goal and do what is needed to move certain causes forward. So yeah, that is my interventions for now.
Very well said. Thank you, Sam. A house that is divided against itself cannot stand. So we will continue to hold hands and to build the Namibian house. We will now cross over into an interactive discussion. There are a number of hands that have been raised, and there are also a number of questions that have been submitted in writing. So I'm not going to respond necessarily to those questions that have received responses from the speakers directly. I'm going to allow those who have raised their hands, who have got a new intervention that has not been submitted, to take the floor. There are two hands that are raised, and I'm going to allow these two individuals to take the floor. Yvonne Amukwaya and Absalom Italomo and Nambuli will take the first three hands. Yvonne. Yeah. Just a second. Yeah. Are you able to speak now, Yvonne? You should be able to speak now, Yvonne. Okay. Let me try somebody else. I'll go with the second speaker, Nambuli. Yeah, I'm trying. There we go. Nambuli, you have the floor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm from the engineering fraternity, and we're talking about youth venturing into business. I would like to question, I do understand that the government is allocating a lot of money to vocational training and education, but we are now seeing a lot of graduates from these VTCs, NIMT and so on that are seated down without anything to do. I think the main issue is graduates from school don't necessarily have the skills to venture into business. What modalities are there from the government sectors to ensure that these graduates, for example, gains 2 years of graduate schemes in certain entities for them to be able to acquire the necessary skill to enter the business afterward? I think that's my question.
Thanks, Nambuli. That's clear. I'm going to take another two questions before we respond. Absalom, you're up next. Yvonne, if you're ready, you can take the floor now. Absalom Itamalo, can you take the floor? You have all been unmuted, so you should be able to speak. I'm not sure why you are not coming through. Arma Shifotoka, you have the floor now. 2-minute
Okay,
interview.
thank you. Can you hear me?
Please introduce
Hello.
yourself and where you are calling in from.
I'm Arma Shifotoka. I'm calling from Windhoek. I'm from the construction team, but my question is far from construction. It's based on agriculture. As I asked earlier, that does the Ministry of Agriculture have like platforms that allow the youth or people in Namibia to help them, to give them ideas on how to go about food production in the country that will also reduce unemployment in the country? Because I know if we are to boost food production in the country, then we are also at the same time able to tackle the unemployment in the country. Because we have a lot of people that has traveled here and there, and then they know a lot on agriculture. They've seen how agriculture is being implemented in other countries. And if you are able to help our ministry also to implement some of the activities and some of the methods, I believe food production will be improved in the country. As we know now, we are facing this COVID-19. The borders are being closed, and then food production isn't really sufficient in the country. But if we had a proper food production in the country, then we'll not have problems of food to the people and so forth. I know people will be able to have enough food for themselves. We'll also be able to have cheap food when we are selling to local people. As you know, most of the food, even in the local communities, are expensive because we like to produce more that is needed in the country. Thank you.
That is very clear. We'll take the final question. I hope it will work. Admas, you can unmute your mic. Mute you. Okay. We can take a final question.
All right.
Mr. Shitaleni, you have the floor. Good afternoon. Mr. Shitaleni?
Yes, thank you very much, moderator. Allow me to thank the presidency for this initiative, and the presenters, and as well as the participant. I have two advice that I would like to be considered. One, I think it's a very good initiative to set up such a stage for the youth. And I would like to advise that maybe this should happen not just now, but it should be a tradition. If we can set up such a platform at least 2 or 4 times a year, I think that would be very good. The second comment that I have is that when I joined the forum, you mentioned that Mr. Inkumbi, in his intervention, indicated that there is a higher rate of fatality for the SMEs. And probably I may have missed the reasons for that. And I would like to advise that maybe from a DBN intervention, they should consider conducting a study to determine the cause of fatality on the SMEs. I do not see a future for this country or any other without SME industry properly funded, properly developed, and properly guided. In this case, and I think that for most of the time, as much as we want the youth to progress, the youth can come up with initiative on services, can come up with initiative on products, but the challenge remains. In the most of the cases, it's really market development. And without a proper market outline, it does not matter what initiative. I was a bit curious to say, what is that causing the higher rate of fatality for our SMEs? Is it access to capital? Or what is it, skills and knowledge? And I thought that maybe we should look into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. We'll respond. The poll has come up in front of your screens. Please do it now. Just fill in those quick questions. We want to have some data to improve our services. We'll take one more question while you're filling in the poll. I think we've got Mr. Rockefeller. Is that correct? Kingsman. are you able to take the floor? You've been unmuted. Kingsman? Okay. If not, we'll move on to the next person, Mr. Lennox, in no particular order.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself and where you're calling in from.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Lennox Muya. I'm calling from Geneva, Switzerland. I work for the trade office in Geneva at WTO. I don't have a question, rather a comment directed to Vuyo, who gave a presentation on the Namibian economy, specifically when it comes to the issue of policies. Indeed, we have a very good policy in Namibia, but sometimes we tend to forget the most critical one, which is the SACO agreement. That requires us to review, because this is where the major problem is. Over the years, we have been focusing on part 7 of that agreement, which focuses on revenue, forgetting other elements such as part 8 that focus more in terms of industrial development. So where do we draw the line? Our tariff administration is administered by ITEC, which is an independent body in South Africa. The issues of rebate that industries or companies that have to use to utilize in order to ensure that the inputs into production that they bring into Namibia, they are brought at a much lower cost for them to produce goods and services in order to achieve economies of scale. So there are major problems that we have, especially on the agreement. If we are about to think about economic recovery, we need to ensure that we do a post-mortem on the SACO agreement in order to identify those challenges. Lastly, on the issue of the priority sector, yes, indeed, you have mentioned, Madam Moderator, that the growth at home strategy serves as a basis. As you may recall, if you go through the strategy, you have 2015-2020 targets. Among those, you have the issue of agro-processing, fishing. It's one of the issues. But what is missing, very, very important, is the issue of pharmaceutical as well as medical supplies. We have seen that during the outbreak of COVID-19, there were many export restrictions that were imposed by the world, including our neighbor South Africa, whereby we could not access affordable medical supplies. There was a restriction in terms of exporting those products into the market. So these are, in a nutshell, that some of the issues that we have to look at as youth, especially on reforming as well as reviewing the SACO agreement. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very, very much. I'm feeling generous. Let's take one more so that we can have 5, and then we'll respond and do another round. There will be a second round, but let's take one more from this first round, please. Are any of the previous speakers ready? Kingsman, Rockefeller, are you ready? Yvonne Amukwaya, are you ready? You have the floor. Can we take Domingos Chio? You have the floor, Mr. Domingo.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome. Yes, make a contribution, please. Where are you calling in from?
I'm Domingos Chio. I'm calling from Budapest, Hungary. My question is more on the agricultural capacity. What are the views on the red line? And we are talking about changing the mindset of the youth, but we have a lot of arable land in the north that could be used to increase our local capacity, but so we still have restriction to that. I just wanted to hear more views on that.
Thank you very much. We'll begin the response. I'll start with the questions on agriculture and give those to Mr. Sakariangi Kembwa. The question was about the capacity development for farmers and what we are doing to capacitate farmers to be more productive. I know the bank has got programs.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me just try and get this. Yeah. The one thing is a good question. The one thing that we see in agriculture is the drop over time in the contribution of agriculture to the gross domestic product, where you've moved from roughly 11% in 1990 to hovering around 3% now. And that to some extent talks to productivity, and I think part of that is linked to skills and commitment, of course. Now, from the bank's perspective, we do have a training and mentorship program that we fund ourselves. We spend between 9 and 10 million every year training farmers throughout the country and mentoring them, and paying mentors who are successful farmers to actually mentor the upcoming farmers throughout the country. But of course, you need to multiply that on a bigger scale across the country. And I think that sort of funding needs to come from a number of stakeholders. Of course, the bank is one. I would think government is the other. And I would think non-governmental organizations that are in development are also the others. And then really we can leverage the skills in agriculture that lies in the country, as long as we are able to then have funding to have those people dedicate time and skills to that kind of thing. I think that is one thing. There's a lot of farmers that have the skills, but you need to move them around and get them to dedicate their time. The red line is, I think, an important topic. It has been on the agenda for a number of years. But I think if you talk meat, yes, you've got a red line problem, except if you actually process that meat, then you can export it to other places. But processing, of course, is not that cheap. But we need to think also that agriculture goes beyond just livestock farming. There is horticulture. There is obviously generally crop farming, and we really need to look at that and say, if we go into vegetable production, if we have smaller plots, if we try and get government and other players to help us harvest water and have water available for irrigation throughout the country, then we can really produce vegetables, we can produce maize and all other things. And that does not have anything to do with the red line. Then we can actually sell as long as the market is actually developed. And we spoke earlier about government as well as obviously the commercial enterprises. So look beyond livestock and look beyond meat and really look at all the other things. I think, Daisri, there are a number of questions that I think you would need to take away for the Ministry of Agriculture that are being posted, and I think is good input, for that ministry. But generally, I think the youth must also maybe just organize themselves and approach the Minister of Agriculture, put some of these ideas on the table. I know him to be quite an open-minded minister. And I think he can work around how best to activate, I think, youth schemes in the country.
Thank you very much for that. Our commitment also in the advisory office is that we are going to collate these inputs and we will refer them to the different ministries as recommendations, and also to inform our own formulation of the priority programs. Next, I think that in Kumbi there was a question about the high SME mortality rate rather, and how that is coming about and how it can be mitigated. I think you just need to unmute. Let me try to unmute. Thank you.
My apology. Thank you very much. I was saying that the question came from Master Shtaleni, and I think he has pointed out the facts quite correctly, that SMEs have got a high failure rate. He asked the question, has DBN conducted a study, for example, to determine why SMEs are experiencing a high failure rate? And he rightly pointed out that he does not see a future for Namibia without SMEs. And all this, definitely that's a very correct point. In terms of a study, DBN has not really conducted out a specific study. But the fact that SMEs have got a high failure rate is known throughout the world, not only in Namibia, but across the globe. I think to a large extent, the reasons are also known. Some of them, Master Shtaleni have also alluded to. One of them, for example, is access to finance, lack of skills. He mentioned these two. market access could also be a problem for an SME who has low volume products. So all these are challenges and they require specific interventions. For example, access to finance, lack of skills. These are interrelated challenges. Access to finance, banks would like information, and then the SME typically tend to be somebody who is very good in what they do, but they may lack business management skills and experience, financial management. I always give an example that here in Namibia, if you want audited financial statements from a large corporate named Power, or Haven List, you'll get it immediately and you'll get more than what you even needed. But for an SME, a bricklayer that knows how to build, building a financial model, preparing management accounts, those are challenges. And having money to pay somebody to do that is also a challenge. All that contribute to that SMEs not being able to provide the required information to a lender to access finance. So all these challenges are interrelated and they are known. And therefore, specific interventions and support programs are required to help SMEs to improve access to finance, to develop their skills, for example, business incubation centers, and also to prioritize their products and services by having preference procurement, for example, for SMEs, or by making provision for SMEs to have their products put on the shelves in the retail spaces. So from a DBN perspective, in terms of our intervention, we have policy-based lending interventions. In my introductory remarks earlier on, I talked about the skills-based facility, for example, that is targeting specifically SMEs and specifically young people with relaxed or no collateral requirement, no equity contribution, the mentoring and coaching program that goes with that immediately, and a young entrepreneur has secured funding under this program, they are also attached to a coach or a mentor. We have got a list of service providers, people that are experienced in business or that are in consulting, that we have signed service level agreement with, that are paid by DBN to provide these services, particularly to SMEs. So it is true, it's naturally SMEs have got a high failure rate because of challenges that are known. I'm not so sure that there is a need to conduct a study. The challenges are basically unique throughout the world, but intervention and programs are required. Policy-based lending, preferred procurement methods, for example, business incubation, and so on, to help improve access to finance for SMEs, to help improve their chances of success, and to help them grow and one day graduate from being SMEs to large corporates. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I think that builds in very well with the first question that we received from Absalom, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going to try and attempt to just respond to that, because he was asking about the preparation. How do we prepare unemployed young graduates to become job creators? What programs are in place? I wanted to indicate that TVET has reformed its curriculum to include entrepreneurship and business management as subjects in the curriculum to prepare students. We've also introduced what we call production units, and these production units work as a small consultancy. So the young people have the benefit of working on the job training, but they also can actually generate some revenue because they provide services to some government offices like hospitals, repairing beds and doing the plumbing, etc. The Minister of Higher Education introduced the Student Entrepreneurship Program, which is a program that is run on campus at universities, and it's also supposed to be a transition between tertiary education and joining the labor market, and if you want, entrepreneurship. These are some of the things that we're doing to support graduates so that they can leave their education with some skills and ready to hit the ground running. Vuyo, you're up next. It's the final question that came in from Lennox, and he was talking about the trade agreements and the rebates and how we can optimize.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about trade agreements, we need to take not only the SACU agreement, but there would be within the SADC, but also within the EU, like your quotas that you have with Norway and so forth. and be able to say, how do we position Namibia to be able to benefit from these agreements? So for example, what you have in Europe is the European Green Deal. That says, unless you bring zero emissions product to Europe, we will not be buying them. And therefore they are using their quotas, for example, in the Norway to say, Namibia, you need to get us zero emissions meat into Namibia, but you also need to be able to then commit to the climate change targets. So that becomes a problem if you don't have a strategy, because that means that you need to fund the zero emission production facilities to get the meat to be zero emission. What the European Green Deal provides for is saying we can also finance you to be able to meet these requirements. So therefore we see it as an opportunity. Similarly, when you look at SACU, there are those developmental exemptions and rebates that have been negotiated, but once more, they haven't been presented and used in a strategic way. So therefore, by looking at diplomacy, economic and climate diplomacy, you can be able to then position Namibia to be able to then say, given what we have around the land, in terms of we can be able to provide greening ability in terms of the land, in terms of the desert and so forth. Can we then be able to negotiate offtake agreements from these trade agreements, which means that money comes for products that are produced in Namibia, but also within those offtakes, there would be funding that will enable those products to be developed. When you bring the funding here, you're able to actually make sure that you create jobs, but you also create entrepreneurs, not only in just agriculture, but in also around the beneficiated industries. You can have plastic polymers. You can be able to have animal fodder, green animal fodder, and there's a multiple of product industries that can be created. So what is required in the country is to be able to have that unified strategy that will then deal with SACU, with SADC, with the EU, and to be able to maximize what is the end game. We want to be able to have more products being created in Namibia, and we want to have more investment in Namibia using the land that is not competing with agriculture, but the desert can actually be used. You have a sea coast where you can be able to desalinate water. You can have aquaculture inland in every region because you have the right ingredients. So it's about then formulating that strategy that enables you to do that. Then you can be able to then, when you go on the higher value beneficiation, when you start talking about pharmaceuticals, medical supply, using things like moringa that can be beneficiated in multiple kind of pharmaceutical kind of applications, you can be able to then solidify your position in Namibia. And all this with climate change. Namibia can be a zero emissions economy before 2030 by being able to utilize the current land you have and the current productive capacity you have in terms of youth that can be able to be manually employed across the value chain in the agricultural, but also other kind of sectors. So it's about making sure that climate diplomacy and economic diplomacy becomes unified to enable to then give you leverage to negotiate SACU and the European Union deals and any other trade agreements.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to round 2. There are already 5 speakers who are queued, and we're going to allow them to take the floor, beginning with Mr. Kashangua. You have the floor. And if he's not ready, we'll have Oliver Muriro and Mr. Lazarus Shimi, Gaza. So let's have those 3, and then we can take the next few. In no particular order, whoever is ready, either Gaza or Kashangua or Oliver. You are all unmuted.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, Oliver, take the floor, please. Thank you. Where are you calling from?
I'm Oliver Muriro. I'm a youth development work student in Windhoek. And I'd like to agree with Mr. Ngikembua, what he said, that the youth needs to also get involved into diversified types of farming. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I would like to agree with Mr. Ngikembua, if I pronounce the name correctly. He talked about the diversification, that youth need to get involved into diversified types of farming, not only just meat farming or livestock farming. So like these days we have got what we call hydroponic gardening, which the youth like in urban areas can do. It doesn't need a lot of space to conduct it. So youth can organize themselves in groups like of 2 or more and come up with hydroponic gardening projects, which can help to contribute to food security in Namibia, and it can help to reduce also the prices of fresh vegetables on the market. So I think Namibian youth just need to think widely about new types of farming when they want to venture into agriculture as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Valid. Let's have the next caller, please. Either Kashangua or Mr. Lazarus Shimi. You have all been unmuted. Ready when you are. I see Kingsman, you're also back. If you want to use your opportunity, you can. You are on the queue. Anyone who is ready from among you. Gaza, I can see you are unmuted. Please take the floor. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move to the next while the colleagues get ready to take the floor. We have Elias Joel. Are you ready to make your contribution? Elias, you can speak. Please unmute yourself. Oh, Gaza, I see that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much, Madam Moderator. I'll be very brief. And I want to thank the Office of the President for this platform. It is really indeed has been an informative one. And I think in the future we should keep up with such information sharing session. It's really very encouraging. My contribution, is, like I said earlier on, is very brief. And on the onset, Madam Moderator, I was just of the view that amongst your panelists, I think labor was supposed to be represented in this platform, because labor, we all know that labor is one of the factors of production, and it contributes highly on our jobs, particularly on the young people in our country, and moving forward, and basically hearing from the panelists, particularly the Mr. Nafimane Shipanga from Trade. He really alluded on a lot of industrialization projects. Some have failed, some have succeeded, and some we still have learning curves to go through and to try and iron out what needs to be done. But my question or my contribution is rather that the silo mentality, I'm of the view that that's what's killing us. Because if Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Industrialization, for example, work hand in hand and know exactly at least the key project that will enable to create more jobs, and not just create jobs, but create decent jobs for the people, because it will be counterproductive having just the fact of creating a job, but at the end of the day, the people that are employed, they are still in abject poverty. So that will be counterproductive to us as a nation, particularly on the youth. And lastly, maybe if Mr. Nafimane can just explain more in details, he mentioned the Amtrak program that the Ministry of Industrialization is currently busy with. Perhaps just to shed more light on that. And I want to thank you. And lastly, I'm also participating from Switzerland, Geneva. I'm the labor attaché in Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for your participation and valued contributions. It's so good to have a global participation. It's the beauty of the internet. Okay. Is Gaza ready? We have unmuted you, so just check on your side if the microphone is muted, and then you can take the floor. I see you're unmuted. You have the floor. Maybe there's a challenge with the microphone. Is Kingsman ready? If not, we're going to move to Tuliki Amwele. And
hello.
Yes, you have the floor. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. One of the comments, remarks you made regarding social progression and the fiscal policy took my interest the most. I feel with regards to the predicament we are facing with the pandemic, I feel that maybe perhaps the government should start venturing in grassroots education by educating people on the significant impacts external shocks have on the social, economic, and political aspects. Because with regards to, for example, the COVID virus that has hit the world, because now I'm in the north, I've experienced that a lot of Namibians are very ignorant and on how to, you know, be cautious, the social distancing and wearing of masks. I feel maybe perhaps people don't understand the implications this virus, this pandemic has on the economy, on the social well-being of people. I don't think the ignorance is intentional. It could just be perhaps that people don't have a know-how and an inside understanding of the depths of what this pandemic has had on the economy. So I feel in the future, perhaps the government should restructure and create a mechanism that allows education and awareness to the grassroots people, and not just the surface to say that, no, you must wash your hands, there is COVID, it can cause this and whatnot. That is needed, but we also need to go in depth to educate people. What does this pandemic, the implications it really has on the economy, so that I feel if we do such, it creates that self-awareness and changes the paradigm mindset of the person to be able to reason differently to the way they are reasoning now, because we are saying we're ignorant and whatnot, but I think it's just the fact that people really don't
cut you just to allow for others to speak, but I think you have made your contribution.
Okay.
Yeah. Let us please have 2 or 3 more. Thank you. Are any of the others on the queue ready? If not, we'll move to Petrus Nipale. But Lazarus Shimi, you still have the floor. Kingsman, you are first in line. But until you take the floor, we'll move to the next person.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Desiree. Most of my questions has actually been answered in the process, but I still have 3 little questions that I think might even be of interest, to other people rather than myself. The first question, number 1, I just want to know if there's any portals where the youth can submit their ideas, or like innovation hubs, like a Namibian version of Silicon Valley, for instance. Question number 2, I want to know what's the difference between Agribank and the commercial banks, besides the relaxed conditions and the interest rates. For instance, like are they competitive on turnaround time? Because sometimes opportunity can also be time sensitive. Question number 3, what are the methods currently used for distributing such information? Is it easily accessible to the youth? Are we meeting them halfway, for instance, in their playgrounds, for instance? Yeah, that's basically it. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thanks for those questions, very clear. Kingsman, are you ready? If not, we'll move to Petrus. Any of you? If not, we'll move to...
Yes, hello.
Good afternoon, Petrus Nipale.
Yes, hi, how are you? Thanks for the opportunity. My contribution is mainly on on the unemployed youth. It's more like a suggestion, perhaps. We have a lot of, especially technical guys like engineers. We go out encouraging young people to go to university to study and become engineers and so forth. So would it not be, I think I would suggest that we invest a lot in our human resource, so that I know when we have different companies, investors coming into the country, investing into explorations and so forth, then at least even if we cannot really offer financial resources, put financial resources on the table, we are able to put up human resources. With for example, when graduates leave university, we absorb them into different ministries like the works ministry, or even ministry of defense, where we send them out to further their studies, gain more knowledge in terms of strengthen their research capabilities and so forth, becoming experts. And then when companies like USAP and so forth, mining companies, come and say no, they want to explore, what do we have to offer? We can offer human resources, put them in the table and say, we have so many of these graduates, we have trained them, they have become experts in this field. So this is our part of our equity contribution towards whatever project that we are, or whatever investment that you intend to carry out in our country. So that is more, because you have a lot of, we invest so much money through NSFAF of students going to university, but they graduate and they go, they are unemployed, or they are somehow tried to encourage to create businesses, small businesses of their own, which in most cases they don't apply the actual technical skills that they learned in varsity. So that is more or less my contribution towards that. And the other thing is also one last thing is maybe we should also consider setting up like a national research center, especially in the area of nuclear energy. I don't know how far government has ever considered exploring research in the nuclear field, because we are the 4th largest uranium producing country in the world, and I don't think we are really utilizing that resource to its full capabilities.
Progressive, thank you very much, Petrus. We're going to take the last caller for the day, and then we'll allow the panel to respond. Before we take the last caller, I just want to highlight that from this juncture, the panelists will do the speakers are going to do their closing remarks, and in those closing remarks, they have made note of the questions that you have posed to them directly, either directly through the call or through the Q&A box, and they'll try to respond to some of those in their closing remarks. If we can now have the last caller for the day. One more. Helvi, are you ready? Helvi Shindume? If not, we can take somebody else. Yeah. It looks like you're online, Helvi, unmuted. You have the floor. If not, we can move to Dion Shekuza. Dion, are you ready?
Good morning. Good afternoon, rather.
You're both on, so we'll allow the last 2 speakers.
Let Helvi go first. Then.
Very good. Helvi, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Dion. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Daisy, for the opportunity. My contribution goes directly to Mr. Sakaria, since he's more into agriculture and Agribank. I would like to ask him, Mr. Zakaria, if you're really someone that is into agriculture, you must have realized that comparisons of, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Helvi Shindume, I'm founder of the Women in Agriculture Namibia Club. Okay, so Mr. Zakaria, if you are really someone that is into agriculture, you might have noticed that comparisons of men's and women's ability to purchase land, for example, reveal that both have equal rights to purchase land, but the financial position of the individual determines who purchases the land, right? So it is easier for men to purchase land, as most women are not in possession of any tangible credit, property, or assets, for example, collateral credits, right? Now, I want to ask Mr. Zakaria, what are the banks doing to ensure that there is a gender equilibrium when it comes to giving these products or loans out? If they're not doing anything, I would like to advise him that they should take this into consideration. The same way they give products to youth, since they do not have any collaterals, they should also consider women specifically into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helvi. Dion, you have the floor. You are the last speaker for this afternoon before we close up. Keep it short.
Thank you very much, Desiree. Greetings to everyone. My name is Dion Shikuza, and I'm calling from the capital city of Windhoek. Extending my gratitude as everybody else, associate myself with those comments. Thank you for organizing the call, and congratulations to our fellow youth, Honorable Emma Theophilus, for getting an appointment. We are very excited to have one of us there. In going forward with my short contribution, I'd like to stick to three main terminologies that I'll borrow from His Excellency President Hage Geingob, and those are in particular the systems, processes, and institutions when we're talking about young people. In terms of systems, the Namibian Youth Agenda needs to be properly organized, and I mean sector by sector. As an example, we're talking about agriculture, but we don't even have a youth agricultural policy as we speak currently. And it would be great for us as youth to be organized sector by sector so that we know what the youth position is in energy, what their position is in water, what their position is in forestry, and it'll make it a bit easier to find them opportunities and not just throw it out to the broader group. And the second terminology on processes, we need a collective ownership and responsibility on the youth agenda, because for too long, mandate and responsibility either burdens one or few institutions or allow others to pass the buck and say, that's not our mandate, that's a Ministry of Youth mandate, I think you need to talk to them. And yet that probably is the area where that particular young person is interested in. So I believe all processes need to take into account the youth agenda. And the one on institutions is we need to increase the number of bodies and custodians responsible for young people, because there's an assumption these three, we have three currently, which is the Ministry of Youth, National Youth Council, and National Youth Service. But there's an assumption that these bodies are experts on every topic related to young people. Sometimes they don't have the extra capacity, especially when you're talking about technical issues like fourth industrial revolution, and yet they have to think of a youth position in that sector. So I think if we increase the number of bodies therefrom, we would be able to also allow more perspectives to come and not over-encumber those few institutions. And my second last point is on skills recognition. Until we learn to quantify and qualify our raw talent, we will always believe we don't have skills and capacity in Namibia. So in order to increase employment, you need to first qualify people. In order to qualify them, you need to quantify the skills. And I think NQA need to look into that. You'll find people who know how to lay bricks and build a house, but on the NQF level, they don't have that qualifications. And how do we test them to give them that paper so they can work further? And lastly, my last point is, let us not discuss Namibia's development without taking into account Africa's development. Pan-Africanism, Agenda 2063, these are very, very, very important points to always keep in the background as we develop our countries, because we as the African nation or continent are moving towards one agenda. And I always am very surprised when people forget to include Pan-Africanism, whether you're talking about philosophy, technology, biology, or any other area. Let us always stick to that philosophical principles that our people had as a past. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And one last thing, can Mr. Martin Inkumbi please consider supporting Agribank's mentorship and training program. I don't think it will be that much to add a little 5 or 6 million on top of the 10, in particular looking at young people. Thank you very much.
There you have it. Thank you, Dion. I'll call you Dion, Mr. Last Thing Shekuza. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, Sam, but you were sensitized that I wanted you to just do a 2-minute take-home summary, really a synthesis of the conversation that we had before we move into the closing statements. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much once again. Yeah, I have a couple of reflections here from the day. The first one is really that I think one of the things that became very, very evident through this talk is that there's an incredible amount of interest as it pertains particularly to agriculture from Namibian young people. And I think part of the way forward should then include how do we take this interest, how do we take this momentum, how do we take this energy and drive it forward, whether that means continued engagement with the Ministry of Agriculture or the other bodies. And of course, remembering, like was mentioned before, diversifying, not looking at agriculture through one lens, but really looking at it at the spectrum that it is. And I think the second point that really came out, particularly on SMEs, is really that the understanding that SMEs need various resources to succeed. I think funding is definitely one of them, as was mentioned, but as was brought up constantly, issues like access to market, issues like basic entrepreneurial training. Entrepreneurs and SMEs in general really need a holistic and enabling environment to succeed. And pumping out funding to SMEs, we know that will not help. It will not help solve some of the systematic problems that we have as well. So deliberate efforts at ensuring access and changing some of the systems that we have in place will help us succeed. The other issue that came out was really that there are a lot of varied investments in youth and programs, loan schemes, and grants for young people. I think how we communicate these opportunities perhaps needs to be re-looked at because a lot of the young people did not know about some of the programs such as Empretech, such as the programs available from DBN. So I think how we communicate those programs perhaps needs to change. And I think engaging the young people on how to communicate these programs and how to reach them will, number one, ensure that young people have access to it, but also from our side, ensure that we are able to have success in reaching our target audience. The other issue is really the vast opportunities that our country has in terms of the land, the desert, the sea. I think we have seen how countries in the Middle East have done it. Countries like Egypt that were really almost completely just a desert, and now they are sustainable in terms of food production. And I think as Namibia, we have huge lessons to draw from those countries. So yeah, the issue of information sharing and just recognizing the opportunities that we have there. The second last issue is really the issue of industrialization, particularly in a sustainable manner. And I think Namibia and I think a lot of African countries have the opportunity to industrialize in a sustainable manner. And I think this is something that we need to take advantage of. I think there is perhaps a missing link between that ideology and how it comes down into practice. But I think this is why platforms like this are important, because it allows one to see almost the end from the beginning. Yes, and then, yeah, the last issue really has to do with information dissemination and how indeed information is power, and then really looking again, are we reaching the most vulnerable? Are we reaching the young people that don't have technology, that are not on this webinar? Are they finding out about the opportunities that are available to them? And I think those are some of the issues that we need to consider and some of the takeaway points for today.
Sam, thank you for that very thorough but concise summary. I don't know how you did it to summarize 150 minutes of discussion into 2 minutes, but you did it. And that's why I asked you to do it, because I had confidence you would do it. Thank you. We've come to an end. Panelists, we're very grateful for your time. I'm going to request you please to do the final round of responses and also for you to share your final thoughts and sentiments on the way forward before I close it off for the day. In no particular order, I'll begin with Helia Nandago, because she's top left.
All right, Desiree, thank you for the opportunity. In conclusion, I think, or in summary, basically, from a central procurement board, I think it's very important to highlight that we cannot conduct procurement without the involvement of our public entities, and the public entity needs to take cognizance that they are the key drivers in economic reform in the country, economic growth in the country. And they can only do that by involving all Namibians to participate in economic activities of procurement. And this is by bringing up national preferential criteria that will create an enabling environment for people or individuals such as the youth and women and previously disadvantaged to participate. But as an enabling environment is created by these public entities, it's also our responsibility as the youth, as citizens of this country, to ensure that we meet the specific criteria that are set out there. There is no point in getting an enabling environment, but you're failing to make a concerted effort in trying to meet those. So I urge the youth, please go out there and learn about what the legislation says, read your bidding documents, understand what is being asked of you, and make an effort to try and comply with those requirements. By so doing, you are able to at least participate in economic activities. There was a question posed on the values of some of the bids that today a bid came out, which is costing 6,000. And obviously an unemployed youth or a self-employed youth might not be able to participate because of the value of the bid. But for you to participate in these kind of activities, there are certain financial criteria also that you need to meet. And you can only meet them if you know that you are able to deliver the services. And in so delivering the service, you should be able to meet all the criteria. So let's all work together in trying to ensure economic growth and in trying to come out of these difficult times. We are all struggling, but we should all work together, both public and private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin Nkumbi.
Thank you very much, Desiree. I just wanted to make a few comments. One is that I can say that I have been in the banking industry for a couple of years, and I can definitely say over the years, I have seen more and more, especially previously disadvantaged young Namibians entering the business environment. And I can also confirm that here at the bank, a significant part of the bank's just under 9 billion loan and investment portfolio is actually advanced to businesses that are firstly owned by previously disadvantaged Namibians and secondly by young entrepreneurs. Then I want to make a comment that obviously the limited resources sometimes hampers the full implementation of well-intended interventions and policies. Say, for example, this call for collateral-free and cheap loans. You can only advance those when you have got almost free capital. As a bank, and the difference between a fund and a bank is usually that the bank is able to mobilize capital by borrowing from other institutions and from the market. As a bank, if you do that to on-lend, you need to make sure that you on-lend that money responsibly, such that you can collect it to be able to pay it back to the financiers from which you have raised it. That is what is called financial intermediation. So the point is simply that I'm making is that the limited resources do sometimes hamper the implementation of well-meant policies, such as policy-based lending. And that basically then will mean that not everybody who will walk into a bank looking for money will walk out with a bag of money. So we have a saying that good business is good for development, meaning that only that business that has got the highest probability of success will contribute ultimately to economic development and growth. Because if an investment is made and it fails, everything that was well intended will also be lost. Employment is lost, resources are lost, including both the bank and that of they promote us as well. And lastly, I just want to comment and encourage young entrepreneurs to continue thinking, to continue being innovative, to come up with business concepts and start enterprises, because failure should actually not be part of our vocabulary. I say, one, actually don't fail. You only learn from that failure so that you can succeed tomorrow. So I am quite positive and optimistic about the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we please have Emma, Honorable Emma Theophilus, in no particular order?
Thank you very much, Desiree. I was taking some notes around the issues raised. I think also I've been answering some questions posted on the Q&A platform just as an onset in case we don't get a chance to respond to them. So I won't touch on those because they're public for all the participants to see. But there's one thing I took note of amongst all the others, and it's also around labor. And it's really around how we can, with all efforts around the different industries, to address youth unemployment. And I think some interventions or some suggestions have come up to say that some industries should perhaps, like agriculture, the coal industry, be flooded with young people to try to reduce the numbers. Around looking at how, for example, we can have, I know that the Ministry of Labour has come with an apprentice policy, a national apprentice policy, and this is mainly so that those graduates, the issue raised around graduates who graduate but have no employment, so that it's mandatory for players in the public and private sector to hire interns, because one of the barriers is that people ask for experience, but you have not gotten a chance to prove your skill set, and therefore it makes it even harder to get employment. Also, I've learned yesterday only that the Ministry of Labour is looking at an unemployment insurance. I don't know how far that will go in ensuring that, for example, we are able to add value to economic activities by having more and more people employed, but it could be, in the meantime, a solution to the socioeconomic impacts of being unemployed. And lastly, I would just like to add that more and more, because of the fourth industrial revolution, of course, it has its positive. We're able to digitalize, we're able to use systems to make our processes faster and better. But that also means that much of the workforce that is not being able to be retrained to be able to learn new skills could lose their employment. And more young people, as soon as they get into the industry, will have to come out again because they're not up to date with the skills, and machines are taking up their jobs. So I think all those, as you can see, it's like a mixed salad. It's no one size fits all solution, and everyone should, from every sector, it could be sports, agriculture, ever pull their weight to see how they can make it more viable for young people to take positions of employment, but also become employment creators. I cannot, for the life of me, think of possible interventions that would be coordinated to get the results we want. But I think if everyone just adds their 2 cents and tries in their own way, I think we can get somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those concluding remarks. Can I request Mr. Freddie Muya to come in?
Thank you very much. In my closing remarks, I would just reiterate the same fact that I've mentioned, that the sport industry indeed shouldn't be undermined as the industry that can indeed contribute very much in terms of employment creation. As I mentioned also from my opening statement, where we can be able to create direct employment and we can be able to create indirect employment. In the same vein, our youth most of the time, which is very good. I had listened about the credit schemes and other loans that they can be able to get from various sources. But you find that many times we would like also to encourage most of our youth that at least some of them, they must also venture into sports academies, because those are also very good opportunities. Because if you look in a country like Senegal, which I visited, most of our youth in Senegal, they've got a lot of sport academies. And out of those sport academies, they can be able to employ many youth, and at the end of the day, become self-sufficient and self-reliant. Because at many times, you want to go into an industry, after we get a loan, an industry which is well saturated already, it becomes very difficult for you to sustain yourself. But also that they need to go out and also explore other avenues, like in sport academies, because Namibia have got talent, but we do not have a lot of sport academies. That can also be another business opportunity that they can also be able to open for themselves. So believe me, the sport industry is quite big. And this industry, I think if we do a research and find out how many people are employed in sport, we are going to get a different figure by the end of the day. So we encourage many youth, especially those who could not do very well in school, even those who are doing very well in school, because sport goes beyond all the boundaries. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. I think that's an interesting pathway on the sports academies. You're solving two problems with one stone. Patrick, Sam, are you still here? Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Desiree. Just to conclude also, I think just from a principle perspective, for me, it's just important to acknowledge plurality since we live in democracy. So the panacea is not going to be just agriculture. It's not going to be just tourism or manufacturing. I think for me, the big word for 2020 is ecosystem. And there's multiple ecosystems. And so we have to recognize what these multiple ecosystems, where do they intersect? And so I think the first problem for me is the government cannot continue to have sector-specific development plans, because agriculture needs a filmmaker to go tell us in terms of demand-driven how good this product is, might need a packager that packages into this form and use recyclable goods. So even tourism needs, you know, whether it's from the value chain of food to transport. So everything is so intersectional, but we have an outdated systemic approach to these things, and therefore the institutional arrangements don't meet the knowledge that we have. And therefore the services that we are providing are fragmented. There's duplication. It's not consolidated. So in my messaging is things need to happen simultaneously. Now, the occurrence and the intensity are different based on sector, but they need to happen simultaneously, and they need to be demand-driven. So even in terms of procurement, it is important to look at innovation, because even if we talk about equity, procurement laws sometimes stop innovation and creativity, even in our diamonds, thinking about the value chain. The reason why we export them after a certain point is because we don't think Africans are creative. Right? And so how do we bring in those institutions where we're able to control a large part of our value chain based on the raw materials that we have? So for me, in closing, I think it is important to acknowledge when we come to the means of production, which are obviously the land, the labor, the capital, the enterprise, and now currently technology, it is important to recognize that Namibia, we have a vehicle, but the vehicle doesn't have fuel, or it only has fuel sometimes, or it's always in a reserve tank. Again, because of these institutional arrangements and the types of services that we provide. So the culture and the creative industries is the industry that's going to propel every industry. Because if we make it demand-driven, people want to understand the human interest stories of why we have chosen a certain agricultural approach, or why renewable energy is now the thing that we need to sell in Namibia, even as our own country. How do we use these panels? Information and access to it are the drivers of every industry. And that's by creativity. 4IR. If we're not sector specific, we're not going to be the drivers of demand. So mobility, growth, development, equity, as well as profits, all of those are enshrined in the culture and the creative industry. And therefore, if you leave us out, we're competing globally, we're competing continentally, we're competing nationally, locally. You won't make it without us, is my message. Thank you, Desiree.
Crystal clear, we won't make it without you. Borrowing from the language, Honorable Teofilo said it's a mixed bag. You say that we need to mainstream industries, and I agree with you. Design, innovation, youth, these are cross-cutting issues, and the challenge is how to create that coherence. I'm going to request Hafeni from MIT, please, to come in. Sorry, Nafimane from MIT, Mr. Shipanga. He didn't recognize himself. Just unmute your microphone, please. Nafimane, unmute your microphone. I'm trying to unmute it, but unable. There we go.
Okay, I think we are good to go now. Okay, thank you very much, Desiree. First and foremost, I would like to agree with the public to say that the budget allocated to the Ministry of Industrialization is quite not well enough. But The point is that the resources are limited, and like the president have said, we should learn to do more with little we have. So before I go on my contribution, I want to share the fact that before I joined the ministry, I have worked for the bank. In my last 2 years, I was with credit analysis. And I'm sure Mr. Ngombi and Mr. Nkemba will agree with me if I say that the default rate of our SMEs who have been given loan facilities by the bank is quite alarming. And that is because of the mindset. If you look at the people who are given loans, most of those that default to pay is not necessarily because of lack of businesses, but because they divert funds to different things. And that is where the MBTech program is coming in to change the mindset and how people think as successful entrepreneurs, to make sure that if you get resources, you plan everything and use the resources according to your plan, not necessarily to see whatever is coming on the side and then splash money. Comes the economy is not good, then you are unable to pay the debt. And that is the reason why the banks are asking for collateral. Anyway, it was just on the side. There was a question about the market access, which is critical in all business and development. And as we are speaking, the Ministry of Industrialization is working on mobilizing the retail sector to sign up for the retail charter, which we believe will definitely assist our local developers to bring their production into the mainstream or the retail sectors of the country. Now, we are talking about the MBTech and the fragmentation of support services. In fact, the MBTech program is supposed to be the link between all the institutions, government and private sectors that are dealing with the business development. Because the moment we have the right mindset of entrepreneurship, then we are guaranteed that things will get better. Now, just for those who joined us lately, I will give a brief introduction of what the MBTech program is. A program designed to change the behaviors of entrepreneurs from an ordinary ways of doing business to behave in the behaviors associated with successful entrepreneurship. This program have 10 competencies that are associated with successful entrepreneurship.
I'm sorry,
yes.
I'm going to have to disturb you because we are 42 minutes over time. I think we don't have the luxury of anymore. We just need to close off now.
Okay. Maybe just to close off, I just to say that the MBTech program was established last year, and we have started already the training. The office of the MBTech is now operational, fully operational in the Ministry of Industrialization on the 2nd floor. Anybody who needs information on that one, they can contact the ministry. The office is open. On the other hand, there was also an issue about information dissemination. So my conclusion is that moving forward, we are going to have a national approach to make sure that the people are aware of the MBTech program. So that's all from my side in short.
Thank you very much for that. Tatesaki?
All right, thanks. Let me answer Lazarus and Helvi first. Lazarus, you asked what's the difference between Agribank and a commercial bank? We are a development bank, and a commercial bank is a commercial bank. And in what way are we development oriented? I think firstly, if you look at the duration of our loans, much longer than what you would get at a commercial bank. If you look at the grace period we would give up anything up to 3 years, before the person actually starts paying, depending on the product they have chosen. You don't get that at a commercial bank. If you look at the rates, interest rates that we charge, some of the products heavily subsidized. You would get products where we charge 4%. And of course, you can only sustain that if you get a subsidy from somewhere. And I think if you look at also the frequency of payment, we try and look at the production cycle. And if your production cycle is annual, then you pay once a year instead of us saying pay quarterly or pay every 6 months. when we know you have not produced and marketed. So I think that's our approach. Turnaround times, I think we try and ensure, that we do that as quickly as is feasible. But again, you need to look at the nature of some of the assets that we finance. So if you finance a farm, there's a couple of things that you need to do. You need to inspect that farm, you need to value it, and it depends also on where these farms are. So vast distances in the country, it's not like financing a vehicle where you just quickly go to the dealer, and you get the invoice and you go to your bank, and without having seen the vehicle, they actually finance it, and that can happen in a few days. So it's a different type of product. But of course, if you are looking at no collateral, salary backed, if all the documents are in, that should also be quick from our side. So historically, of course, the turnaround times have not been their best, but we are working hard to make sure that we actually digitalize, our loan cycle process. And we are right in the midst of, a project to try and do that, so that we move away from paper-based, something that is trackable, real-time, online, and we can actually move fast. So Helvi, you spoke about women and versus men, and you say it's because they have no tangible assets. Maybe not. I don't agree with you 100%. I think some of it has to do with the historical and cultural roles, where farming is taken as more for men than women. Any woman can actually buy a farm, and for the most part, the farm serve as its own collateral, and I think that's what many men actually use. So my invitation is that women should not shy away from getting agricultural assets, because there is actually really no difference between men and women. Just like we target youth, we also have specific targets for women. And I can maybe just tell you that if you look at the last 5 odd years, we've lended in excess of 300 million exclusively to women. When I say exclusively, these are single women. And then, of course, we've lended more than 600 million to couples. And couples, of course, is a man and a woman. So they are part of it. And I think maybe what women also need to do is, if a couple buys a farm, they don't have to do livestock. They can do something else on the farm, like have a vegetable, because that lends itself more to the type of farming that women actually would like to do. So we do fund women, including women who have no collateral. And in the year ended March this year, we lent 40 million to women, and a quarter of that actually went to women without collateral. I think in closing, I'd like to advise the youth that we need to have initiative. So it's good to talk about the constraints and ask somebody else to do something, but I think just get off your chair and start something, and then somebody can help you. Start small and grow, and really target markets where or products where you've got a market, and there is also strength in numbers. You need to understand that there is no glory in trying to do something else, and in the end, if you can't pull it off alone, then you actually don't want anyone else to succeed. Try and do something together. Go and get land together. Approach institutions together as a cooperative or whatever, and then you can succeed actually together. And that is very important. And let's just be accountable. So loans are not for free. And I think if we want our institutions to be sustainable, we also need to be committed and work hard so that we can pay back the loans and the next person can be assisted. And I'd like to thank the Office of the President for arranging this. I think it's wonderful. And let's have more of these, and let's have more stakeholders. But most importantly, let's then get something out of this that can be implemented so that we address the problems.
Thank you very much for adding so much value. Vuyo, you are our final speaker.
So, with the lessons coming from COVID-19, there was a trade-off, a question to say that lockdowns, we need to have lockdowns because lives matter. But also then it came to a point where we then had to have a trade-off to say we need to now ease down the lockdowns across the world because livelihoods matter. And while we're grappling with this, the lives versus livelihoods, then America comes with Black Lives Matter. And actually, when you start internalizing this, it's a message that is applicable across, that Black Lives Matter. But what's also important is that Black livelihoods matter. And what does it mean, Black livelihoods matter? It's not only about the economy. So it's about economic empowerment. It's about political empowerment. It's about social empowerment, creating those ecosystem that Mr. Sam is talking about, that integrates creative heritage, tourism, and sports sectors in this ecosystem, because that then includes our livelihood. Then we also need to be talking about personal mental empowerment in terms of changing our mindsets and taking initiative and actually being able to do things ourselves and not always depending on government. Government has a role to play, but government cannot be able to create jobs alone. Government cannot be able to create enterprises. It requires entrepreneurs. So the entrepreneurs need to take responsibility for their livelihoods. And ultimately, there is a spiritual element. And I think I like what Dion added in terms of our ideology, Pan-Africanism, and our roots in terms of spirituality. There's a whole package of livelihoods. So when we then internalize the lessons that are facing us, is that, yes, lives matter, Black lives matter, but Black livelihoods matter. And we need to be able to take responsibility for those livelihoods and also bring accountability for ourselves, but also for the systems that we are building, so that we can then be able to make sure that Namibia is able to take its place and in Africa and around the world, and be able to utilize its rich assets that can then be able to make sure that our livelihoods are taken care of. So in a nutshell, Black lives matter, but Black livelihoods also matter, and it is the youth's responsibility, and it's a legacy of the youth in bringing the second phase of transformation to make sure that those livelihoods have a purpose behind them.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end, and we started off at the highest. We were on 137 participants, which is exceptionally high. For webinars, the average would be 20 to 50 participants. We had 137 young people read throughout. We have now dwindled down to 84 because, of course, we are over time. But even the 84 are committed, and they are investing their time and resources to this conversation because they believe in that charge that livelihoods matter. So I want to begin by affirming and to reassure that this is not just a talk shop. We were a bit innovative with the platform because we were being responsive to the need, and we saw that young people had a big interest in engagement and to receive more information. But what we can agree to today is that there's need for more of this and maybe a more focused discussion sector by sector. Today was very broad because we were unpacking the SONA, and that is the entire economy. So I can commit that on a quarterly basis, we will have an engagement of this forum, whether it's virtual or when we can meet again physical. We will definitely continue to share information. I want to emphasize Dion's point about youth in association. I want to encourage young people on a sector by sector basis to come into groups and into formation, into association. It makes it easier for government to interface with you if you are the youth in agriculture, if you are the youth representing creative industry, the youth in sport, the youth in manufacturing and business leadership. It makes it a stronger interface and a stronger voice for you compared to one by one. Finally, on portals where you can drop your business plans. The president has created the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board. It's going to be operationalized during this financial year. That investment board has the remit for SME development, and within that investment board, there's going to be a department that is looking at SME incubation, and we believe that will be your one-stop shop drop the window. But I want to say that with caution, because we have to take a whole of government approach. You still have to engage your sectors. If it's environment, if it's health, if it's education, where your business is, you must engage those relevant institutions to ensure that you have the institutional support. It can't be a top-down approach. In conclusion, I want to say thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the youth who participated. Thank you to those who put forward their questions. You have all invested very valuable time. You are very detailed in your responses because you really want to add value, and we are grateful. We are going to record this discussion in a document with the recommendations, a summary, but we also will share the video link. The objective of this was to see the format, but what we definitely want to do going forward is to continue the consultation as government formulates the second term economic plan for recovery. We believe that we have to shape that future together. We want buy-in from all stakeholders. And because of the impacts of the current circumstances on young people, we want young people to have a significant share of voice in the formulation of that response policy. Thank you very much to my team who have been instrumental to make this process work out. There have been many learnings and we can only improve on the journey going forward. I want to just conclude and to encourage the young Namibians with the word of our president when he said in his State of the Nation address that true character is revealed during times of crisis. In this time of crisis, we should be strong. He described the Namibian spirit as strong, as indomitable, as undefeatable, and we must not allow circumstances to discourage us. We are with you and we understand the conditions and the circumstances, and we are really committed to driving through the change that we all want to see, as you can see from these very committed civil servants who have spent 3 hours with us. They could have been in parliament, they could have been in their boardrooms, they could have been doing productive business, but we consider this to be productive business as well. Thank you. We have been enriched and we have learned a lot from you as well, and we look forward to the next one. Keep your eye posted on the NAM Presidency social media pages. Thank you.